Hello warriors, Namaste, Namaskaram, Vanakkam, Sasyakal and welcome to today's session of Crack Costing. We are here to revise the entire costing conceptually in less than 20 hours to help you achieve your dream marks in costing. I am Tabish Hassan, a chartered accountant, all India ranker, international speaker, your friend, brother and guide, and today we are here to discuss labor costing. So first, let's look at how ICAI is asking questions from this chapter. There are questions from this chapter in every attempt. On an average, we have questions of up to 9 marks. In May 18, we had 15 marks, and there are attempts when we had questions of up to 10 marks as well. So undoubtedly, this chapter falls in the A category. This is a very interesting chapter because from a factory worker to Mukesh Ambani, ultimately, what every person earns is called labor. What a factory worker earns is called labor. What a doctor earns is called labor. What a chartered accountant earns is called labor. What an engineer earns is called a labor. What MD of a company earns, that is also called labor. So divided by professions but united by the concept of labor. Let's first have an overview of all the topics. I've categorized the topics based on its relevance for exams. So first we've got the labor turnover ratios, then we've got the labor remuneration system wherein we'll discuss the different plans to make payment to labor, then we've got the miscellaneous areas. First, let's begin with the labor turnover ratios. In very simple words, labor turnover ratio means the rate of change of employees in an organization. For example, assume Mukesh Ambani and I are close friends. So on 1st April, I went to Ambani's factory. I saw there were 1,000 employees on the roll. Okay. So after almost a year, I happened to visit him again. So this time on 31st March. So I went this time, there were 1,075 employees. So I asked, Mukesh bhai, what happened? So he tells, what's there with labor? Some employees leave organization when they want, so in their place we'll have to recruit other employees. So this keeps happening. That's true. If we consider a period of time, the number of employees between two time frames would never be same. There would be some employees who have left the organization and there would be some other employees who have joined the organization. So here what we are seeing is the change of employees over a period of time. But is the absolute number not sufficient? In the given example, in total 75 employees have changed. Is this number alone not sufficient? Why do we have to take a relative number? Let me tell you, Tata has one of the lowest employee turnover ratios. Okay, suppose there are 10 lakh employees there, only around 1,000 employees might leave the organization in a year. That comes to 0.1%, suppose. But if I am the employer, I had just one employee and in that year he left the organization. So if I just consider the absolute figures, from my organization only one employee left, from Tata 1,000 employees left. So I might feel better. But when we take it as a percentage, when we see the change in employees divided by the number of employees, that's when we get the right figure. So based on the size of the entity and based on the different industries, the numbers vary. So we have to get the relative figure. So how did I get that? So as I told the example, in Tata, in a year, 1,000 employees left the organization. 1,000 employees are changed. This is over 10 lakh employees who are there in the organization. We multiply it by 100 to get the percentage. So the percentage comes to 0.1%. So what have we done in effect? This is the change of employees. I have divided it by the number of employees and I have multiplied it by 100 to get the percentage. Okay. But as I have already told, if we take a period of time, the number of employees will never be the same. So which number of employees should I take? Should I take employees at the start of the period or at the end of the period? So when we've got such an uncertainty, what we do is we generally take the average number of employees. So average employees is equal to employee at the start of the year plus employees at the end of the year divided by 2. In the first example which I gave, I had 1000 employees at the beginning of the year, 1075 employees at the end of the year, whole divided by 2 gives me 1037.5 employees. So we've decided in place of employees, we are going to use average employees. So we have the format set. It is change of employees divided by average number of employees into 100. Okay. So what may be the reason for change in employees? What could have happened? Majorly there could be two factors. Few employees could have separated from the organization. Separated as in they've left themselves, or we've removed them, we've discharged them from work. So they've left voluntarily or we've discharged them from work. On the other hand, there would be new employees. We call them as new accessions. So what might be the reason for the same? So because some employees have separated from the organization, in their place I wanted new employees. So in their place I've replaced the employees. So we call them as employees replaced. Or I'm planning for expansion. So there is a new position left in the organization. So I want an employee there. So I might want employee for a new post as well. So we've discussed change in employees. There might have been some employees who are separated from the organization. They might have left voluntarily, or we might have discharged them from work. And there can be new additions to the workforce, which can be because as a replacement to the employees who have left the organization, or for the new positioning, right? So the first thing we'll study here is to calculate the total number of employees at the end of the period. So how do we calculate it? We begin with the number of employees at the beginning of the year. Okay. Then we reduce the number of employees who have left us. We also reduce the number of employees who are discharged. Okay. For that, we add the employees replaced in place of the employees who have left us. We also add the new employees who are recruited for the new positioning. This gives us the closing employees at the end of the period. Just to give a very simple example, suppose the number of employees at the beginning of the period were 1000. Okay. Out of that, 100 employees left the organization. 50 employees were discharged. So we had 1000 employees, 100 left, 50 were discharged from work, right? And now in their place, we've added 100 more employees. We've replaced them with 100 more employees. And then we've got new position. So for that, we've added approximately around 125 employees. So this gives us the closing balance of 1075 employees. So the number of employees left and the employees discharged from organization, they are together called by the term employees separated. And the employees replaced and employees for new position are called by the term accessions. So all in all, you have learned three formulas. First is closing employees is equal to opening employees minus the number of employees separated. It might be because they left voluntarily or we've discharged. Add the new accessions. Accessions because they have been replaced or there is a opening for new post. Okay. So the number of employees separated is equal to the number of employees who have left the organization plus the number of employees who are discharged from the organization. Left is by them voluntarily, discharged is we removing them from job. The new accession means the replacement new employees who have joined as a replacement for the employees who have left the organization, or there was a new positioning. So for that we have got new employees. So these are the three formulas. So we've discussed that labor turnover ratio is the rate of change of employees in an organization. So the employees, we calculate it as a relative number. So in the denominator we always have average number of employees and multiplied by 100. So there are three methods of calculating labor turnover ratio. First is separation, second is replacement, third is flux method. So what does separation method tell? The formula is contained in the name itself. It tells compare the number of employees separated in a period with the average number of employees and get the percentage. So why should we do it? Because the employees separated from the organization are not happy with us. So we have to see what percentage of employees are not happy with us. So for that we use this. So it tells the number of employees separated in the year, in the period, divided by average number of employees, whole multiplied by 100. If you have to put it in our example, the employees separated altogether were 150. Average number of employees was 1037.5 into 100. Gives us 14.45%. The next formula is replacement method. So what does replacement method tell? So it tells compare the proportion of employees who are replaced in the organization with the average number of employees. That is, employee replaced divided by average number of employees into 100. Now why should we look into replacement? This formula tells, see, if employees are separated from the organization, there is a chance that they have left voluntarily, but there is also a chance that we have discharged from their work. But replaced is what costs us. So if an employee was actually required but he left the organization, so in his place we have to replace another employee. To replace an employee we have to incur cost. We have to select him, train him, recruit him, all those procedures are there. So for that cost is required. So we should try to reduce the proportion of replaced employees. That's also true. So let's see what this percentage comes to. Number of employees replaced is 100. So we get 100 divided by 1037.5 multiplied by 100. .63%. So this was replacement method. And next we've got the flux method. So what does flux method tell? Flux method tells, see the total change in employees. So the employees who are separated from us, that is also a change. The employees who have newly added to us, that is also a change. So add both and compare it with the average number of employees. So what we get is number of employees separations plus new accessions divided by average number of employees into 100. So in our case the employees separated was 150 and the new accession was 225, whole divided by 1037.5 into 100. %36.15%. So one observation, flux method, the employee turnover ratio as per flux method will always be greater than the total, one observation, the employee turnover ratio as per flux method will always be greater than the employee turnover ratio as per replacement method and separation method. Why? Because it considers both the employees separated from the organization and the employees who are joining the organization. One more interesting observation is whether separation method plus replacement method is equal to flux method. So let's break the formula to get it. So in flux method, we see the employee separations plus new accession divided by average number of employees. Separation is the employees separated divided by average, replaced is the number of employees replaced by average. Okay. So new accessions is separations, employees who have left us, employees who are discharged by us, plus new accessions is employees replaced plus for new post divided by average employees. So here we have separation plus replaced by average. So if the employees for new post is nil, then the sum total of replaced plus separation will be equal to flux method. But if there are new positionings open, then the formula would not be equal, right? Now let's have a look at the important questions or the important adjustments which have come in the previous exams from this particular topic. So there can be two types of questions. One is the normal question, wherein they'll give us the data, they'll give the number of employees separated, the number of new additions and everything, and we will have to calculate the labor turnover ratio. That is simple. And then we've got a different type of question, wherein we have to reverse calculate. So how does that work? Suppose, have a look at this question. Employee turnover ratio as per flux, replacement and separation is 20%, 10% and 5%. The number of employees replaced is equal to 50. And accordingly, we will have to calculate all the numbers. So here first we have to take, we have employee replaced, and corresponding to that we've got the replacement ratio. Okay. So based on this, replacement ratio is equal to number of employees replaced divided by average employees into 100. 10% is equal to number of employees replaced is 50 divided by average employees into 100. So we'll get the average employees as we got the average employee as 500 employees. So now the same formula we would use here. We've got the separation, we've got the final ratio, we've got the average employees. So based on that, we'll get the number of employees who are separated from the organization. Sorry, separation is 5%. Again, we've got the flux formula. We'll use this. We have got the average number of employees. We've got the total labor turnover ratio. Accordingly, we'll get the total number of employees separated plus new additions to the workforce. We know the total number of employees who are separated. We know the replacement. Based on that, we'll get the new labor. Next thing is the calculation of equivalent annual labor turnover. So this question had come in May 2018. It is actually very simple, but some students had confused this. So in the exam, they'd given that the labor turnover ratio was 3% per month, and we had to calculate the equivalent annual labor turnover ratio. So how do we do that? It's pretty simple. So for 1 month, it's 3%. So if it's 12 months, it's how much? It's simple cross multiplication. It is 3% per month into 12 months is equal to 36% per annum. Next, we've got the total cost a company is incurring due to labor turnover. If an employee leaves an organization or a new employee joins, there is certain cost to the organization. That is why they want to reduce the labor turnover. So what are all the costs? It will be given in the question. Majorly, we have settlement cost, the new recruitment cost, the training cost. We've got the cost of rectification because the new employee may not have produced the article properly. So we might have to rectify that. So there is a cost of rectification. And then we have the contribution lost on unproductive hours. So an employee left the organization, say for example on 15th July. Okay, in his place new employee was joined on 30th July. So for 15 days no work has happened, and to train him we've taken 10 days. So altogether for 25 days no work has happened. So if the employee was there already he would have produced the goods, we could have sold them and earned the contribution. That contribution is lost because that employee has left the organization. That contribution needs to be calculated here. This gives us the total cost due to labor turnover. Just to summarize everything, 3 methods. Separation method is number of employees separated divided by average employees into 100. Replacement method is number of employees replaced by average employees into 100. Flux method is the number of separation plus new accessions divided by average employees into 100. Clear with this topic? So now let's discuss labor remuneration system. In this, we'll first discuss the 2 types of wage payment, then we'll see how to calculate efficiency, then we'll see the different incentive plans. So first, the 2 systems of wage payment. Firstly, we have the time rate, next we have the piece rate. So what is time rate? Here we tell employee, for how many hours you work, you will get the pay. That is hours worked into rate per hour. That is time rate system. Next we have the piece rate. Here we tell, just because you are in the organization, you are spending time, we won't pay you. If you've actually produced goods, only then we pay you. So the wages is based on the number of pieces produced into rate per piece. So these are the 2 main methods to calculate the wage payment. Okay. Next we have the efficiency rating. But why do we want to see if an employee is efficient or not? Because we want to motivate efficient employees. So what do we do is, for employees who are efficient, we give them a bonus, we give them incentives so that everyone wants to be efficient, right? So how do we calculate? Firstly, I'll give you a small story. Suppose there is a race, a running race between Usain Bolt and me. Okay, so we had 2 different races. First, Usain Bolt ran 100 meters in 10 seconds. Okay, I ran 50 meters. I ran 50 meters in 9 seconds. Okay, so based on the time, I have taken less time. So am I not more efficient? Again, we had a different race. So this time, Usain Bolt ran 1 kilometer in say 2 minutes, and I ran 2 kilometers in 1 hour. So based on the distance, am I not better? No, right? What is the issue here? So when we are comparing one thing, there should be something constant, right? If you are comparing the output, R should be constant. If you are comparing the R's, output should be constant, right? So one of the 2, like we cannot compare these both, but we can compare what is the timing Usain Bolt took to travel 100 meters and what is the timing I took to travel 100 meters. This can be compared, and I can tell Usain Bolt has taken less time. Okay, what is the time Usain Bolt has taken to travel 1 kilometer and what is the time I have taken to travel 1 kilometer. This can again be compared, but when both are different, it cannot be compared. So first thing is, if you are comparing output, okay, R should be the same. If you are comparing the R's, output should be the same. Okay, so first formula, it is based on the output. Okay, suppose where R's is the same. In a day, an employee works for 8 hours. Okay, the standard output expected of him was 8 units, but actually he has produced 9 units. Is he efficient? Yes, he has produced more than what was required. So how do we see how much percentage efficiency? What we do is, we get the actual output in the actual hours divided by standard output in actual hours. That is 9 output divided by 8, we get it as 125%. We multiply it by 100 to get a percentage. When we are comparing the hours, when the output is the same, say for example, an employee has manufactured 10 units of output. Okay, so the standard hour given to him to manufacture 10 units was 10 hours, but he has done it in 9 hours only. So is he efficient? Yes, he is efficient. So how do we calculate this? Okay, If the standard hours are more, it is better. So we put standard hours in the numerator and actual hours in the denominator into 100. Okay. So the two formulas, when it is actual hours and when we are comparing the output, it is actual output divided by standard output, or it is standard hours divided by actual hours. Okay. Now let's come to the incentive plans. Before this, we have got a master question based on which we will understand all different incentive plans and what is the difference. Suppose there are 4 workers who work for 8 hours per day. The time rate is 100 per hour. The standard time per unit is 15 minutes. So based on this, can we get the piece rate? Okay. So for 1 hour, an employee gets 100 rupees. Okay. And in 1 hour, he is supposed to manufacture, okay, 4 units. So what is the rate per piece manufactured? It is 100 divided by 4 is equal to rupees 25 per piece. Okay. So the actual output is given. Okay. Now let's do some basic calculation. So the actual output is already given. Actual hours, everybody has worked for 8 hours. So what is the standard hours? Standard hours we get based on the formula output divided by 4 in this case, because for every output he required, the standard was 15 minutes. So in an hour he could manufacture 4 units. So we do actual output 40 by 4 is 10. What is the time rate? It is the actual hours spent into 100 per hour. So 8 into 100. What is the piece rate? The number of units manufactured into 25 per piece. What is the units manufactured? 40. So it's 40 into 25. $500. So clear till now? Now we have to calculate the efficiency. So here we are comparing the hours because the actual output is the same. Okay. So which is better? To manufacture 40 units. Okay. The actual hours he has taken is 8. The standard hours was 10. So is he efficient? Yes. How did we get that? Standard hours divided by actual hours. So it's 10 by 8. 125%. This is 8 by 8 is 100%. Here we get around 87.5%. Here we get around 62.5%. Okay. Now let's have a bit more of calculation. What is the time allowed? What time company is actually allowing him to manufacture the output? This is also called as the standard hours. What is the time he is actually taken? This is called actual hours. What is the time saved? It is standard hours minus actual hours. Okay. So the standard hours is already given. Actual hours is same. And the time savings, here the employee has saved 2 hours. Here he has saved nothing. Here the employee has saved minus 1 hour. But negative savings is no savings. So we don't write it. In fact, he has not saved anything. Here also we don't write anything. Okay. So based on this, now let's get into the different incentive plans. I have bifurcated them into 4 categories so that it is easy to remember and we can understand them logically. First is based on as a percentage of piece rate. Okay, it's called as differential piece rate wages. First we have the Taylor's differential piece rate. Okay, so what Taylor tells, if the employee is less than 100% efficient, give him only 83% of piece rate. But if the employee is 100% efficient or more than 100% efficient, give him 125% of piece rate. Okay, is that fine? So here what the wage payment we are making is based on percentage of piece rate. That's the first observation. Then the efficiency, we've got less than 100% and next we've got 100% or more. Okay, if you want to calculate in our question, okay, let's calculate it for A and for C. Okay, A's efficiency is more than 100%. Okay, so we will pay him 125% of piece rate. So 125% of What is the piece rate? It was 25. Okay, this is per unit into number of units produced was 40 here. And C, because his efficiency is less than 100%, we'll pay him 83% of the piece rate 25 whole multiplied by number of pieces he has produced, that is C has produced 28 units. This is 1250. This is 581. So here what we are doing is, efficient worker we are rewarding, inefficient worker we are degrading him. So what are we doing is, we are lowering the wage payment to be made to inefficient worker. In a way it's good, but if you see, we are not even paying him the basic wages what he would have otherwise received. Suppose the standard output to be produced, okay, was 32 units. Okay, the actual output he has produced 31. It is just 1 unit less. Okay, if there was normal piece rate, he would have got based on the actual output into 25. Okay, but now what he is getting for the actual output, 25 into 83% of that only we are getting. So that is 643. In effect, just because he has produced 1 unit less, he is losing almost 150 rupees. Okay, so it is a bit harsh on the employees. So what happened? Another person, Merrick, came with a different method. Okay, so he told, let's leave 100%. Okay, even if an employee has achieved up to 83% of efficiency, what we'll do is we'll give him the normal piece rate. Okay, if he's achieved more than 83% and up to 100%, we'll motivate him. We'll pay him 110% of the piece rate. And if he has achieved more than 100% efficiency, we'll pay him 130% of the piece rate. Okay, so in a way, even if your efficiency is slightly less than 100%, you still are getting more than the normal piece rate. Even if your efficiency is less than 83%, still for the units you have manufactured, you would get the normal piece rate. So in a way, it's better than Taylor's efficiency for the inefficient employees. So let's calculate for 2 employees. A, his efficiency was above 100%, so he'll get 130% of 25 rupees into the number of units manufactured. And C, C's efficiency was somewhere around 87.5%. So he would fall in this slab. So he would also get 110% of 25 into the number of units manufactured. Okay, so these are the 2 methods of paying wages to employees, which is based on the piece rate, that is the number of units he has manufactured. First we had the Taylor's piece rate system, next we have got the Merrick's differential piece rate system. Now let's come to the next type. Here it is based on time rate. First one was based on piece rate, here it is based on time rate. Here the total wages for payable to an employee would be the basic wage based on the time rate, and he would also receive bonus. Okay, what is bonus based on? For that we have got different plans, but everybody will get the minimum time rate. In addition, if they are more efficient, they would get the bonus. Okay, here we have the Halsey premium plan. Okay, so total wages is equal to basic wage, time rate plus bonus. So what Halsey premium plan tells? It tells, if an employee has saved some time, okay, if an employee has saved some time, that means he has saved some cost to organization. Okay, so what Halsey premium plan tells is, if you have saved some time, that means you have saved cost, we will give you 50% of the cost saved and we will keep the 50%. Okay, so bonus as per Halsey plan is equal to, okay, cost saved into 50%. How do we get cost saved? Cost saved is the number of hours saved into rate per hour. Right, this is the total cost saved. Into 50% of that goes to employee. This is the Halsey premium plan. Okay, so main things here bonus is based on percentage of cost savings, number one. Second thing is 50% of cost saving goes to employer and the other 50% goes to employee. This is Halsey premium plan. Okay, if you have to calculate for an employee, suppose for A, okay, for actual output, okay, the standard hours is 10, the actual hours is 8, so he has saved 2 hours. Okay, so he'll get the time rate. He'll get the time rate based on the 8 hours he has worked. Okay, 8 hours into 100 per hour. In addition to that, he'll also get the bonus. Okay, he has saved 2 hours for us. Okay, for 2 hours we might have to pay him 2 into 100, 200 rupees. So on that, 50% of that we'll give to the employee. Okay, this is Halsey plan. Next we've got the row 1 scheme. Okay, so what this plan tells, this is also the total wages is equal to time rate plus bonus. But how do we calculate bonus? Okay, it tells, suppose, okay, you've saved some time. Okay, so we'll take time saved divided by time allowed. That ratio we will take. Okay, time saved by time allowed. If you've saved more time, you will get more. Okay, and we will multiply it by your basic wages. Basic wages is our time rate. Okay, so percentage of basic wages, if you have saved more time, you will get more. If you have saved less time, based on the proportion of time saved to time allowed. Okay, so here first thing is, it is based on percentage of time wages, time wage or basic wage. Halsey was based on percentage of cost savings. This is based on percentage of time savings. Okay, what is the proportion? There it was 50%. It is based on time saved to time allowed. Okay, what is the speciality of this scheme? Okay, so there might be a chance that because you are giving him incentive, okay, labor might work carelessly just to ensure that he is saving more time. That is possible in Halsey, but row 1 scheme takes a check on that. Okay, suppose for example, the standard hour is 10 and 10. Okay, actual hour in case 1, okay, it is 6, in case 2 it is 3. Okay, so the hours saved is 4 and 7. Okay, in row 1, what happens is the basic wages we get for 6 into 100 plus the bonus would be based on time saved by time allowed into percentage of basic wages, that is 600. Okay, here we will get actual 3 into 100, 300 plus time saved by time allowed into 300. Okay, so 4 by 10 into 600 is 240 rupees of bonus here, and 7 by 10 into 300 is 210 rupee of bonus here. So what it does is, it keeps a check on carelessness of employees and ensures that they are not trying to save maximum time, because sometimes what happens is, just in an attempt to save time, okay, they forget quality, so the quality is being compromised. So row 1 keeps a check on that. Okay, next we have the Bidox point premium system. This is again more or less similar to Halsey plan. what it tells is, okay, so again the total wages is the basic time rate plus bonus. Okay, in Halsey it was 50%, here it is 75% of cost savings. Okay, so we have seen cost savings is, okay, hours saved into rate per hour. Here the hours saved, how they have told is, if I have saved 2 hours, can I also tell that I have saved 120 minutes? Okay. If I divide the 120 minutes I have saved divided by 60 minutes, will I still get 2 hours? Okay, so what they have done is, they have named the hours saved, they have called it in minutes, and they have called this as Bidox point saved. Okay, so Bidox point saved is nothing but time saved in minutes. So we divide it by 60, so we get the time saved in hours into rate per hour. Okay, and 75% of that will be going to the employee. Okay, so first thing is, it is again based on time saved, that is cost savings, and here 75% goes to the employee. Okay, is that fine? Next we have Emerson's efficiency. Okay, so here again it is total wages is equal to time rate plus bonus. So what is the bonus? Emerson tells, if he is up to 66.67%, that is up to 2/3 efficiency, don't pay him any bonus. Okay, if his efficiency is greater than 66.67 and up to 100%, pay him 0 to 20% of the time wage. Okay, if his efficiency is 100%, pay him 20% of time wage. If his efficiency is more than 100%, then give him 20% and additionally give him 1% for every 1% increase in efficiency over 100%. Suppose in our case we had employee A, okay, whose efficiency was 125%. So what is the bonus he would get? Okay, because his efficiency has reached 100%, he would get 20%. In addition to that, the difference between 125 and 100 into 1% for every person, that is 25 plus 20, he gets 45%. Okay, this is the observation 1, if your efficiency is greater than 100%. Second thing, if your efficiency is between this range, okay, if yours is 66.67, bonus is 0, if it's 100, it's 20. Suppose my efficiency is somewhere here, what do I do? Okay, in exam, option 1, question itself specifies that if the efficiency is 75%, pay him 5% bonus. Question might specify that. If question specifies, use the data. If question does not specify, what we have to do is, we have to take a simple interpolation, that is, we get 20% when we are traveling 33.37%. If you have traveled from 75 to 66.67, suppose say for example 8%, then what is the percentage bonus to be given? Okay, so first thing is up to 2/3 to 100 and greater than 100 is the range, and here also we are giving based on the time wages. Okay, so Halsey and Bidox we were paying as percentage of the cost savings, and Rowan and Emerson's efficiency we are paying as percentage of time wages. Okay, this is an important calculation here. Next we have a mixture that is based on time rate as well as piece rate. How do we pay? Okay, this is given, this is called the Gantt task bonus plan. Okay, So this formula tells if your output is less than standard, you pay him the time rate, you pay him the whatever is the time rate. If your output is at standard, motivate him, give him 120% of time rate. And if his output is greater than standard, give him 120% of piece rate. Okay, this output less than standard, I can tell efficiency is less than 100%. Output at standard, I can tell efficiency is 100%. Output greater than standard, I can also tell efficiency is greater than 100%. So for the first two, it is based on time rate. Less than 100, give him the minimum time rate. Look for the hours he has put in. If it is at standard, motivate him, give him 120% of time rate. If it is greater than standard, give him 120% of piece rate. Okay, this is the thing. And one more thing is here at standard. Okay, if you give 120% of time rate also, 120% of piece rate also, it will be same, because if your standard hours is equal to actual hours, okay, so standard output will also be is equal to actual output. Okay, so it will be the same. Say for example 8 hours he has worked and it was 100 per hour, okay, and he has produced 32 units because it was 4 units per hour, okay, and the rate per piece was 25 rupees in the case. Okay, if we take based on time rate, we will get 125% of 8 into 100, that is 800 into 125%. If we take based on piece rate, we will again get 125% based on 32 into 25. 32 into 25 is again 800. So it will be the same in both the alternatives. Okay, so first we have seen based on percentage of piece rate. We have seen Taylor, we have seen Merrick. Next we have seen based on time rate. We have seen Halsey, Rowan, then we have seen Bidox points, then we have seen Emerson. Now we have seen as a percentage of time rate and piece rate. Here we have seen the Gantt task bonus plan. Now we will see hybrid. I mean, these follow altogether a different approach. So what is it? Here we have Bert's variable share plan. It is based on the rate per hour and multiplied by square root of standard hours into actual hours. So suppose the rate per hour is 100, okay, into standard hours for manufacturing the product was 10, and actually I have taken 8 hours. So what it does is, in a way, it motivates them. Okay, so I will tell you what is the logic of this square root. Okay, so the wages is rate per hour into number of hours. Okay, so hours, okay, instead of directly writing hours, can I write hours, square it and take a square root? It gets cancelled and it's the hours left. And here what they have done is, instead of taking just the actual hours, they have multiplied standard hours with actual hours. Okay, so what happens is, if you are more efficient, your standard hours would be more, so this product would be more, and in turn you will get more wages. That was the entire objective. But here is a catch. Okay, suppose there are 2 employees. Okay, standard hours, actual hours. Okay, first employee, the standard hours was 10, actual hours he has taken is 8, so he is more efficient. Second employee, okay, the actual hours required here was 10. Oh, actual hour he has taken is 10, the standard hours required was 8. Okay, he is not efficient because actual hours is more. But both these employees will get the same payment. Okay, so the intended objective is not met because of this. Okay, next we have got one more plan. This is called the accelerating premium plan. Okay, here what we do is 0.8 into basic wages whole multiplied by efficiency square. What it does is, if employee's efficiency is greater than 100%, we write it as decimal. Suppose it is 1.25, so we square it. Okay, so it becomes even bigger. Okay, and then the entire wages to be paid to him gets increased. But if his efficiency is less than 100%, say for example 0.8, when we square it, it becomes even lesser, so that If an employee is more efficient, we are motivating him. If the employee is less efficient, he is getting even lesser. Okay, this is the accelerating premium plan. So these are the 4 different bifurcations under which all these methods have been put. Okay, so mainly from the exam perspective, Halsey and Rowan plan are the most important ones. And if a question comes in exam based on labor remuneration, most probably it would be based on Halsey or Rowan plan. Just to summarize everything we have revised till now, we have divided the entire incentive scheme into 4 big buckets. First is based on percentage of piece rate, next is based on time rate, next is based on the combination of piece rate and time rate, and next, the last one is the hybrid, wherein we use square or square root. In the hybrid, okay, first we had the accelerating premium plan, wherein it was 0.8 into efficiency square into basic wages. Next we had Berth's variable sharing plan, therein it was rate per hour into square root of standard hours into actual hours. So A accelerating, we took square, B Berth, we took a square root. Next, coming to time rate and piece rate, we had Gantt task bonus plan. So up to 100% efficiency, that is, if it is less than standard, we used to pay him the minimum guaranteed wage payment. At 100% efficiency, okay, that is when the output is equal to standard, we used to pay him 120% of time rate. If it is greater than 100% efficiency, we used to pay him 120% of piece rate. Okay. Next, coming to time rate, here we pay them the basic wages based on the time they worked, and additionally we give them a bonus. In Halsey, bonus was 50% of cost savings. In Rowan, bonus was based on the proportion of time saved to time allowed on the basic wages. In Biddock's point system, it was 75% of cost savings, and in Emerson's efficiency, it was again based on percentage of basic wages, that is the time wages, that is up to 66.67%, it was nil. From 66.67 to 100%, it was between 0 to 20%. At 100%, it was 20%. If it was greater than 100%, it was 20% plus 1% for every increase in 1% over 100%. Again, based on the percentage piece rate, we had Taylor and Merrick. Taylor told if his efficiency is less than 100%, pay him only 83% of piece rate. If his efficiency is 100% or more, pay him 125%. Merrick was slightly less harsh. He told if his efficiency is up to 83%, okay, pay him the normal wages, normal piece rate. If it's between 83% to 100%, that is greater than 83% and up to 100%, pay him 110% of piece rate. If it is greater than 100%, pay him 130% of piece rate. Now let's have a look at how questions are coming from the exam. This is one typical question wherein they have told the minimum wage rate is 150 per hour, the standard time taken is 50 hours, effective hourly rate is 180 per hour as per Rowan scheme. Okay. So the effective hourly rate can be taken as total wages divided by number of hours. We don't know the number of actual hours the employee has worked, so let's take it as X. Okay, so the effective rate, if we do it on a total basis, it is 180x. Okay, we'll get the basic wages, this is 150 into X hours plus the bonus. What is the bonus based on? It is time saved by time allowed into the basic wages, that is 150x. Okay, time allowed here, the standard time is 50. Okay, and time saved, okay, actually he has taken x hours, the standard time required was 50, so we get it as 50 minus x. So if we substitute this, we get the answer. Okay, this was one typical question from the examination based on Rowan. Next, sometimes what happens is question gives a custom method to calculate the bonus and wage payable to employees. Suppose they say that if the efficiency is less than 20%, give this, if it's less than 40%, give this, if it's greater than 100%, give this. So question itself specifies the efficiency and the wage to be paid, or some other factor and the wage to be paid. If question specifies that, we'll have to calculate it based on the specification of the question. Okay. Next, one more thing, one of the most popular questions is the comparison between Halsey and Rowan. What they do is, they tell based on Halsey this is the amount to be paid. So calculate it based on Rowan and tell which is better. Okay. So we have had a question in RTP November 19 on the incentive schemes. Okay. They told that the company is indifferent between paying bonus as per Halsey and Rowan. Okay, and they have given different schedules as different standard hours and different actual hours. We had to tell which is better. Okay. So there were different examples. So if we had to comment based on financial basis, so on financial basis we tell wherever is the bonus is less to be better. But if we take non-financial factors into consideration, okay, Rowan is always better than Halsey scheme. Why? Because Halsey encourages saving of time, but there is a chance that in a hurry to get the work done, in a hurry to save more time, employee may be careless and quality may be sacrificed. Okay. But Rowan has a check on this. Okay. What happens is, in Halsey we are paying based on percentage of cost saving, but in Rowan we are paying based on percentage of basic wages. Okay. So if a 10-hour work he has done in 3 hours, okay, obviously the proportion of time saved to time allowed would be 7/10, but it would be multiplied by wage rate of 3 hours. So the entire product becomes less. So in a way what Rowan scheme does is, it encourages efficiency, but it has a check to ensure that the employee is not careless and quality is not being compromised. That is the first point. Second point here is, okay, if rate setting department, a department which is setting the standard hours, if it has made an error, generally what happens is, in Halsey scheme we end up paying so much more, but in Rowan scheme that does not happen, because if the time saving is so much more, then the wage payment slightly becomes less, because it is based on the wage payment. So these are the 2 points we have to write while distinguishing between Halsey and Rowan. Okay. So this question was in RTP November 19. Again a similar question was in RTP May 21, wherein they have told that the correct rate is 60, but by mistake they have paid 72. Okay, so what is the excess premium we have paid, and what it would have been in Halsey, what it would have been in Rowan, and what is better. Okay, so it's based on these 2 factors. First thing is, Rowan has a check on carelessness, okay, ensures that quality is also being maintained, and second, even if the rate setting department has made an error in setting the standard hours, still the loss as per Rowan scheme is much lesser. Okay, so these are other 2 important things. Now let's come to the miscellaneous areas. Here we have treatment of idle time, treatment of overtime, and calculation of effective labor hourly rate. So idle time, what is idle time? It is the time for which labor is getting payment, but no work is done. It can also be treated as the difference of hours for which payment is made and the hours for which labor is actually working. Let us take an example to understand it better. Suppose Shrikant Tiwari of Family Man, okay, he is a very disciplined person. He enters office at 9:30 and he leaves office exactly at 5:30. Okay, but 9:30 he enters the office gate. So from there till office, and entering office he has to open his laptop, and to work it takes him 15 minutes. Okay, and then from 11 to 11:15 there is a small tea break, and 1 to 2 there is a lunch break, and 4 to 4:30 there is another tea break. So all in all, in the 8 hours, 15 minutes and 15 minutes, half an hour, 1.5 hours and 2 hours. Okay. Okay. Suppose again he took an extra break here from 10 to 11. This extra break was taken Maybe because the computer was not working, computer was updating, or he went and called his friend JK or something. Okay. So let's see if these breaks are avoidable or not. See, this will get incurred, so this is unavoidable. Okay. So tea break is also again unavoidable, the lunch break is again unavoidable, the tea break in the evening is unavoidable, but this 1 hour break he took in between, this was avoidable. Okay. So the entire 8 hours, okay, 5 hours he worked, 1 hour he did not work, and 2 hours he did not work, and that was uncontrollable. Okay. Idle time is again bifurcated into two. One is normal idle time, one is abnormal idle time. Normal idle time is uncontrollable. It has to be incurred and it will be incurred. Say for example, in the given example, the tea break, the lunch break, okay, the time between finishing one job and starting another job, all these are normal idle time. These are unavoidable, these cannot be controlled. We also have abnormal idle time. This is within the control of organization. If we have strict supervision, we can control them. What is this? In between, Shrikant Tiwari took 1 hour break to speak to JK or something. This could have been avoided. So this is abnormal idle time. And we have a rule of costing. Everything abnormal, we take it to costing P&L. We do not let it affect the cost of the product. So abnormal idle time will go to costing P&L. And what happens to normal idle time? We can either charge it to factory overhead or we can inflate the labor rate. We will discuss this further. But here, all this 15 minutes is normal idle time. This tea break is again normal idle time. The lunch break is again normal idle time. The tea break in the evening is normal idle time. But this break is abnormal idle time. So all in 8 hours, for 5 hours he has worked, 1 hour was abnormal. So the wage rate for this 1 hour would be transferred to costing P&L. Suppose it is rupees 50 per hour. So 50 into 1 hour, 50 rupees would be transferred to costing P&L. Okay. Actually he has worked for 5 hours. So 50 into 5, 250, and 50 into 2, normal, 100 rupees. So all in all we have 350 rupees. Let's see how do we make treatment for them. Okay, we've got two options. Option 1 is we can inflate the labor rate, or option 2 is we can charge it to the factory overheads. The point is simple. Even the labor cost due to normal idle time forms part of cost of product. It forms part of cost of product. How do we do that? We can either include it in labor or in overheads. So how do we inflate the labor rate? Simple. We take the total labor cost divided by effective hours. In our case, 350 was the total labor cost. The effective hours worked was 5. So we get it as the effective labor rate as 70 per hour. Okay. Here what we do is, so the net effect of both is the same. So if you are putting it here, in labor we will put 70 per hour into 5 effective hours is equal to 350. Here what we do is, in labor we put 50 per hour into 5 hours is equal to 250, and in overheads we put the 2 hours into 50 is equal to 100. So net effect is the same. We can follow any one of the approaches, but ensure that the labor cost because of normal idle time forms part of the cost of the product, because this was uncontrollable and it has to be incurred. So it forms a part of cost of the product. This is the treatment of idle time. Next we have overtime. What is overtime? Overtime is the hours when labor is working beyond the normal working hours. When labor is working beyond the normal working hours, it is called as overtime. Okay. So we have to understand first three things. One is normal rate, other is overtime rate and overtime premium. Normal rate is the amount we pay to labor during the normal working hours. Suppose an employee works for an hour and we pay him say 50 per hour. So this is his normal rate. What is overtime rate? If we give him 50 rupees during the extra hours he is working, he would not be interested. So we have to motivate him. So how does company motivate him? It agrees to give a premium. It tells instead of 50, we'll give you 150% of your wages. That is 150% of 50, which comes to 75 rupees. So this entire 75 rupees is called as overtime rate. Okay, and what is overtime premium? The premium we are paying to a labor because he is working overtime is called as overtime premium. That is overtime rate minus normal rate. That is 75 minus 50 is equal to 25 rupees. Okay. So this overtime rate of 75, 50 normal and 25 is the premium. This would have been anyways incurred, so it forms a part of labor cost. The treatment we have to learn is for this premium we are paying extra because the labor has worked extra hours. This would have been otherwise also incurred if he has worked extra hours or if we are paying him normal. So the treatment we have to see is for this extra 25 rupees. If overtime is worked based on customer's request, customer wants the product to be prepared very soon, so he is willing to pay the overtime. So at that time we charge this overtime to the specific customer's job. Okay. If overtime is incurred due to mistake of some other department, say for example repairs and maintenance department, the overtime premium would be charged to that specific department. Okay. If overtime is incurred due to some abnormal reason, we know the principle, golden principle of costing. Anything abnormal would not form a part of cost and it will be transferred to costing P&L. If overtime is incurred due to shortage of labor, then what we do is we get the inflated labor rate. We do the total amount divided by hours to get the inflated labor rate, including the premium. If overtime is worked to increase the output, generally what we do is the normal rate we transfer it to direct labor and the overtime premium would be transferred to factory overheads account. So this is the treatment of overtime. Now we have the last topic, that is effective labor rate per hour. So if you want the labor rate per hour, so what do we do is total labor cost divided by hours, we get labor rate per hour. Suppose I got 400 for 8 hours. So we get 400 labor cost divided by 8 hours. So we get it as 50 per hour. Okay. And now we want the effective labor rate per hour. So we get it as labor cost divided by effective hours. Okay. So our objective now is to see what labor cost is, what is the meaning of effective hours. First, labor cost. Labor cost is the total of all cost and benefits incurred by the employer. Okay. So what all does it include? First, we have the basic wages, we have dearness allowance, any other allowance, bonus, commission, every amount employer is incurring for the employee would form a part of labor cost. Additionally, we also have the employer contribution to ESI and PF. These would also form a part of labor cost. Okay. A very interesting observation. There is a difference between labor cost and the amount employee takes home. Okay. Labor cost includes employer contribution to Provident Fund ESI, but when we calculate the amount employee actually takes home, this amount would not be there because this is transferred by the employer to the fund. So, this is labor cost minus employer contribution to the fund. Again, when employer is contributing a certain amount, the law mandates that employee should also contribute the equal amount. So, less employer contribution, less employee contribution. What they do is, they don't collect from employee separately, they deduct from the salary and pay it off to the government. Okay. So, total labor cost less employer contribution, okay, less employee contribution, we will get the amount employee actually takes home. To just give an example, the total of all this is 40,000. Employer contribution is, say for example, 10,000. Employer contribution, say for example, is 10,000. So, the total labor cost is 50,000. Okay. So, from this 50,000, 10,000 employer deposits to the government. Okay. When employer deposits 10,000, employee is also required to deposit approximately the same amount. Okay. So, employer does not recover this amount separately from employee, but deducts it from his wages, and the balance 30,000 he gives to the employees. This is the actual take home salary. Okay. That was the labor cost. We do not want the take home salary, but we want the total labor cost, that is the entire amount employer is incurring for the employee. Okay. Then we divided it by the effective hours. What is effective hours? Effective hours is the annual working hours less normal idle time. We told that normal idle time would be recovered by inflating the rate. So, what we do is we inflate the rate by this way. So, when the denominator amount reduces, we reduce the normal idle time, the denominator amount reduces, the rate per hour increases. That is how we recover the amount. Okay. How do we get annual working hours? Okay. So, we have total days, say for example 365, less holidays, okay, less the days employee has taken leave. Suppose 365 days less 50 days and 15 days. So, we got 300 days. Now, we want hours. We multiply it by hours worked in a day. Okay, so, we get the total hours worked. We reduce the normal idle time. So, we get the effective hours. So, we divide labor cost by effective hours to get effective labor rate per hour. So, this was the entire discussion of labor cost. It is a very important chapter, comes for approximately 10 marks, falls in the A category. First, we have discussed the labor turnover ratios, we have discussed separation method, replacement method and flux method. Then we have discussed the labor incentive schemes, and finally we have discussed the miscellaneous areas wherein we have discussed the treatment for overtime, the treatment for idle time, and also calculation of effective labor rate per hour. I hope it was helpful. Stay tuned for more videos. Thank you so much.